You're listening to Being Built. I'm Aaron Davis, your host, here with DarrenBaldwin, the president of Picus 3D. So tell me a little bit about Picus.
Yeah, so we have the tallest 3D printer in the world.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, out of West Jordan, Utah. If you've been to the area, not long from Sundance, it's actually a great time to be there right now.
Is it?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
poor
Park
thing.
City.
I got you over here recording a podcast.
I know. I mean, it's the best powder in the world right now. And Picus 3D, we have the only 3K 3D printed concrete system in the world that's running right now. That's what our engineers out of Switzerland tell us.
And so you've been there now for several months. How long have you been running the joint?
Officially 5 months.
Okay. Yeah. So you know your way around at this point.
I can give a tour if you want to come out.
I do want to come out, actually.
Need to get out.
You suggested the idea, and coming out and visiting that neighborhood would be cool someday.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll take you up on that. So tell me, what do you know, or how would you explain kind of like the intent behind Picus 3D? Like what does why does it exist? What are you building there, and for who?
You know, it's construction technology, and when you think about the most valuable resource in the world, it's people. I started my career in strategy, but even the best strategy in the world doesn't exist without a great team.
True.
And when it comes to construction, building the most beautiful pieces in the world happens because people are artists. Someone has a dream. Someone has a statement they want to make in a community. But it takes great craftspeople in order to achieve that.
Yeah.
And today, when you look at the labor market, it's quite constrained. So it's a protracted, very long construction process.
Okay.
And that just means a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about building things modularly, doing them in factories so that it can come to the site and you can assemble it in fewer pieces, it just accelerates the construction process.
Yeah.
And so 3D printing is part of the solution to some of our labor constraints in the marketplace today.
Yeah. That's an interesting perspective on it. I hadn't really thought about the labor constraint. And that's not only about getting it done faster, cheaper, whatever, but you're able to build cooler things because you're not limited by those constraints, right? And that's why I've seen some of the images. This is why my head kind of goes there.
Yeah.
And the stuff's cool. The stuff you guys have built is cool.
We call them Picus printed statement pieces.
Okay.
So the early adopters of 3D printed work, they're going after a statement.
Okay.
They want to say something to the community that can't be achieved any other way economically. Because cast in place concrete requires a lot of carpenters, finishers, and time for foundation to cure before it supports solid concrete.
Okay.
Precast takes molds. So if you're going to do a one-off, a statement piece, it's a one of a kind.
Yeah.
Best way to achieve that with precision is 3D printed concrete.
Interesting. And so does Picus, do you print stuff on site, or do you print and ship it? Or how does, if I wanted to, a statue in my front yard, what would the process be like?
Yeah. So our founder, Rob Picus, had been in concrete construction for over 20 years.
Okay. So he knows firsthand all the pains that go into building statement pieces, right?
Yeah. Well, he knows firsthand what it looks like to make a profitable construction company. He's very good at that. He's a dreamer, a visionary. And he looked at all the various options. About 5 years ago, he said, hey, we're using the same technology in concrete construction we've been using since the Roman times, right? 2,000 years. It's pretty much the same. Some admixtures, thank God, to companies like Sika, who provide some of the most advanced product in the world for achieving that. But still, it's for the most part, the process for doing it's very similar. You have wood forms and you pour concrete in it and it sets up.
Wow.
It's
and that's thousands of years old. Yeah,
right. And so you have structures that, over 2,000 years old, they're standing. Okay. And so he looked at it and he said, how can we advance this? What technologies are available? And he did look at do you take a robot on site, or do you do this in a climate controlled factory? And he weighed those options. And he decided that it was best to build a facility climate controlled that had the most advanced process for constructing objects. And so we're printing objects that don't require forms.
Okay.
As we like to say, where we're going, we don't need forms.
So how does it work?
So it works just like a printer.
Okay.
So you have a print head that
just runs. Like a little plastic 3D printer or whatever.
Yeah.
You print a figurine with, right?
If you can dream it, we can print it for the most part. There's a lot of systems that can do, you think of overhang angles, right? To print something, you need something that it stands on.
Okay.
The overhang angle is a measure of just how far leaned over you can print an object. And so this is common terminology in 3D printing. And typical concrete systems can do maybe a 10% overhang. So like the systems that you see where the robot is on site, those systems can't achieve the overhang that we can achieve. And it just means more freedom of design.
Yeah, so I think I've seen, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, whatever, the images of like 3D concrete walls being printed to like make a room or something, and there's not a lot of nuance to that. I mean, it's a rectangle, right?
Yeah,
it's an upright wall, right?
If you want to do something that is a statement piece, that is beautiful, that has curves to it, and concrete, when it comes to making curves in concrete, is cost prohibitive to do that. The images that you've seen online, most of those are quite limited by the overhang angle. You also have to deal with bonding strength, right? So if your print head takes a long period of time to come around, if it takes too long, your bonding between those layers is going to be a challenge. And so through software and hardware and years of experience, we've landed on just the right finesse to get incredible bonding strength. We're coming out at over 8,000 psi, so we're outperforming a lot of those systems that you see online with those big thick layers or standard concrete, and which has their uses. But when it comes to commercial construction and achieving linear feet, achieving themed formwork, achieving parametric facades, like if you imagine a building that looks like it has linen flowing on it, right?
Yeah.
Something that with no
you're not just stacking layers to achieve that. Yeah.
Right. So if you're doing one-offs like that, very unique pieces, this is how we see it being done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, it really kind of takes down some barriers that you would think about when you think about concrete in general, right? And it's really easy to imagine a little piece of plastic or something being printed in your home now. I remember when that was pretty unbelievable, right? Like 3D printing. What is that even?
Right.
And so now you're talking about things that are how big?
So as I mentioned, we have the tallest print bed in the world of any 3D printer.
Okay.
And it's over 16 feet tall.
Wow. Okay.
Sorry about that. I'm getting a call. Someone wants to print a very large object right on now. And, 12 foot, they call it an X by Y by Z axis, or Z axis is 16 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're talking almost 2 stories.
That large.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so when you think about what kind of use cases this solves, you are looking at very unique landscape architecture. So we're right now working with some of the most demanding landscape architects in the nation who have clients that have a lot of money that want to make a statement.
Yeah.
And it might be that community that has such a unique piece when you come into the building or when you step onto the property and it says exactly what the developer, what the owner, what the architect wanted to say.
So what do you mean by most demanding? You don't mean that they yell and scream and they're mean. You mean
come on, we need this fast. I will give an example on being fast. So we got a call from one of our partners that we work with, two of the largest concrete construction companies in the nation, Baker Concrete and Lithco Concrete, two of the largest concrete installers. And they were working on a project in Washington, D.C., a certain presidential center, and the bronze statue beautifully situated in the center. And the general contractor was beginning to complete this project and getting to the landscape kind of final touches when they received a call. Hey, the president of the United States is going to be there in 5 weeks.
Wow.
And it was a little bit of surprise, right? Thinking he's going to be there in 5 weeks. And they realized we have this custom radius seating wall that has to set just right along this radius so that you can see the bronze statue of this previous president. And so our current president's going to be there in 5 weeks. You don't tell him, hey, come back in 10, right?
Yeah.
You do what you can to make sure this job's done. Well, if you're trying to do a custom radius wall, cast in place and getting a crew to show up, even with weather, it just may not be possible. And so they scratched that and they thought, what about precast? Maybe someone can make a mold and get it done. And we know making molds is a long, protracted process. It usually takes months, at least a couple months. And so they happened to know Picus 3D was a company that might be able to do this. They called us, and we went from concept to print to ship to install in 30 days.
Wow.
So when we talk
So
about
President of
demanding,
the
so
United States is showing
it's
up and
not
you need
that
to
the
press
president
them.
was pounding his hand, but people want
Yeah.
to make sure that a project's ready to show off for the
Yeah.
press and for
Wow.
the president's entourage, and so we were able to achieve that in 30 days.
I had no idea you were going to answer with a presidential viewing when I
Yeah.
asked that question, but yeah, that would be a pretty demanding context.
And so, back to your question about demanding. So we're getting invitations to bid on other presidential centers, very large corporate headquarters
Yeah.
who
Okay.
want to show off what they're able to do with their space and their place. If you are hiring some of the best talent in the world, think
Mhm.
of Google, Amazon, and you are going after these. This
Yeah.
hard to recruit
Mhm.
talent. You want to have a place that is inviting,
That's right.
and so it's often these rooftop decks that have landscapes that are very beautiful, and they want something that is not common.
I don't know if you knew this, but I'm not much of a style person, but I've read that style is in style again. That this like minimalist idea where everything's just kind of like square and plain is kind of going out of fashion, and detail and intricacy or whatever is kind of making a comeback. And I wonder if that lends to the demand for quote unquote statement pieces and just kind of this making an impression with your space, right? That's certainly got to bode well for Picus 3D.
Yeah, it absolutely is. When you think about how we create, if you're an architect and you have access to the only stylist in the world that can
Mm-hmm.
do these kind of objects, you want to make your moment when you can.
Mm-hmm.
And there are architects who work with clientele that they want something that's not on a catalog.
Yeah, yeah,
They want something that doesn't limit them from showing how they put their fingerprint on something.
yeah. That's really cool.
And that's what we're able to support our architects with.
Where I kind of started the conversation with what are you building and why? What was the whole foundation of this? So where's Picus 3D at now? I guess there's two questions here. Like, why isn't everybody doing this, right? Like, why aren't you flooded with competition? And then what are your challenges? Because I'm sure those things are related.
Yeah. So just to get a sense of the state of the business, we worked on perfecting the how the mortar, how the polymer, how the activator, all the material comes together, the software and the hardware for that, as
Mm-hmm.
well as other nuances that are absolutely trade secrets. It took some time. It's like finding that perfect cookie recipe, right,
Mm-hmm.
and baking that. And so once we got to a point where we were satisfied, hey, we're ready to go. We're ready to put this product in front of demanding clients that want to
Mm-hmm.
make a statement. We went ahead and said, okay, we're going to build a team
Mm-hmm.
that can support that process. And I arrived this summer, and we started aligning out some of the right resources and having the team ready to go
Mm-hmm.
and start shipping products. So really, it was just this past summer where that began.
Nice.
As I
Okay.
mentioned, in 2022 with that presidential project, and so now we're bidding on some of these very large corporate headquarters and other
Nice.
presidential centers today.
Yeah, that's a great launch experience right there, right?
Yeah, when one of the largest uh, amusement and theme park companies has a purchase order on your desk your first week of work, that's kind of a big positive for your first week.
It
That
is.
was that was work the company had gotten in front of some of these big names, big brands early on who want to have something that's unique.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still early stage in terms of revenue and in terms of getting new product out there. But we're in the process of working with these architects who know that they have something unique that no one else has.
Yeah.
And so that's always a ton of fun, right? To innovate and to create something that breaks the mold
Mm-hmm.
from what people are used to seeing when they hear the word concrete.
What's the biggest obstacle in front of you? What's the biggest challenge that you, as the leader of the organization, are focused on or thinking about?
That's a good question. I think one of our larger obstacles is the fact that most people, when they think of the word concrete, think of flat, gray,
Mm.
cracks, boring,
Hmm.
right? Uh,
Yeah.
You often don't think of a sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
We're anchored to what we know. And so we've got to move people off of what is known and understood into an opportunity where they can achieve things maybe they were limited in achieving previously.
Mm-hmm.
So when I reach out to an architect and say, hey, we've got a stylist no one else has, most architects, okay, come on.
Okay. Okay.
What can I create that I couldn't create before?
Right.
And so you're talking about water features and sculptures and benches and raised planter beds that have a brand or a thesis about them that just communicates in a way that's exciting to people.
Yeah.
So that's our greatest challenge now is taking people from what they've known and saying to what I said earlier, where we're going, we don't need forms.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is such a shift. It takes some getting used to. But as we found with a few early adopting architects, once the light bulb goes off, boy, they're off and creating.
So there's a lot of organic enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah.
Word of mouth happens. And there's a little bit of, I'm sure, jealousy that happens among designers and architects and so on. They're like, oh, he designed that. Now I want to be able to use that tool and execute things like that.
We're excited to invite architects into the sandbox, really, to play. I mean, it's that kind of unlimited design experience. So it's a collaborative process. Sometimes it starts with a napkin sketch, or SketchUp is pretty common amongst architects, Rhino. And ultimately, we have a collaborative process where we work with architects to help them achieve what they're wanting to achieve.
Yeah. So what I heard in that is really just kind of making the capability and the impact of what Picus 3D can do more known amongst the community of potential users. And I think that's a familiar problem to a lot of innovators.
Yeah.
So I've actually had people sitting right there in your chair tell me that, nobody's got budget for something they've never heard of or thought about before, right? And so you're trying to sell into, and in the case I'm thinking of, sell into corporate America or whatever, where you got somebody holding purse strings for X, Y, and Z, and you're offering A, B, and C, right? Just making people aware of something that has not been in their Rolodex of thoughts, or I've got red, green, and blue crayons, and all of a sudden they show up with teal, and it just changes things, right? So marketing and sales and kind of like education about your capabilities, I guess, is kind of what I'm hearing. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is fair. It's fair. We don't get much pushback when it comes to, hey, do you want to tour our place?
Mm-hmm.
But I think unless you can get into Salt Lake City and come tour the place and see the printer and process, it is hard to go from where they are to where we're going.
Yeah, mentally, just drawing a picture.
What we found is the use of virtual reality has been one of the ways that we do that. And so being able to put on a MetaQuest and walk through our facility and see something printed, or walk through their facility and see our objects in the place where they intend those designs to set.
Interesting.
And so we can show them option A, B, and C. And we found that once you can kind of see in that space with your goggles on, you literally get to see and you get the presence of concrete that's formed and curved in ways that they haven't seen before.
That's a really cool use case for VR I hadn't thought about before, but designing and architecting and kind of building physical big physical things in the space, right? That's really cool.
Yeah, because when they get to see it in the space that they intended, so the backdrop is their creation, and we're just showing them with this kind of technology, this is what you can do in this space.
Yeah. So how do you get their canvas into your studio in Utah, or vice versa? And VR is a good solution for that.
VR.
So how mature is the utilization of VR for kind of that process? Is that something you've done a number of times? Is that something that's pretty deep part of your process, or are you exploring it?
We've just started it with a few early adopters, and we've gotten substantial adoption from them. Anytime that we offer it, people say, well, I've never used.
Right. That's what I would say.
Right?
MetaQuest. Is that for video games or something? Right?
So, the Oculus Quest 2 is often what we would recommend people get. We walk them through the process. Sometimes it's the first time they've ever put on any VR goggles. And so that's been a fun part, is for just the adoption of new technology in order to see how our technology fits into their construction process. That's been fun. right? Because you're doing something new together. Once they see how it works, it's we get to create together in that space, and yeah, I think it accelerates.
That is really cool. That's interesting. I mean, you've just changed the way you have a handshake. The content of your offering is unique and innovative in and of itself, but just using a unique avenue that kind of gives the full picture of your capability, it makes a great first impression. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. I like it. What do you imagine? I guess we're 2023 right now. 2025. We're 3 summers from your start with Picus 3D. Where do you think the organization and the industry is going to be a couple of years from now?
Yeah.
I know you can't read the future, so something about this will be wrong. But what's your best guess?
I think, Aaron, we're going to have multiple plants
Okay.
around the world. I believe that we'll have quite a lot of adoption in Europe.
Okay.
The coasts are seeing adoption. Now we can print and ship to most of the country within a matter of days.
Wow.
It's less of a needing to be right across the street from the consumer and more just from a capacity and being able to respond. We see the demand for more creative and more modular construction continue to accelerate. In terms of number of plants in total, we think we're going to be at 12 plants in 2025.
Okay.
In terms of industry, we'll continue to stay in construction, obviously with concrete, but there are use cases that we anticipate we'll be solving in 24 related to facades and structural that today is not being touched by anybody.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you anticipate more competitors joining the field?
When we think of competition today, I mean, the obvious competition is cast in place and precast concrete. But as you continue to have tightening labor, cast in place becomes a challenge for architectural concrete. But as we look at other solutions, precast, particularly for one-off and low volume, when you talk about statement pieces, is not something that's fitting there as well. So we'll continue to compete well, I think, in those spaces, and maybe in some cases play well with cast in place companies and precast companies who don't want to be in the business of unique one-offs. So yeah, whether there's going to be a lot of entrants within the space, I mean, like any technology, we would anticipate that other people can buy a robot, but we have a lot of knowledge when it comes to baking the perfect recipe that's taken years to perfect.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question: is what's going to keep you ahead in that race? It's that concoction that you've built.
Yeah,
and obviously you're not advertising all of the components of that recipe,
that's right.
And it'll take a lot of time before those little things creep out and competitors get a hold of them. By then, you'll have multiple plants and lots of customers and great stories and
deeper relationships, right?
More Oculus headsets everywhere.
That's right.
Yeah, and I wonder too if the multiple plants makes it easier for people to do visits, to a facility or whatever, to have an impression that you can't get it via VR. Is that something that you see being impactful with broadening your footprint geographically?
Yeah, virtual reality is so new at this point that we're open to sending a quest to a key customer so they can literally see close to them what this looks like in their space. It's really connecting the dots for them. Do I see it as the only way that we're going to get adoption going? No. I mean, we're using social media, we're using direct marketing, and using VR is only after we've evaluated that this is the customer we want to invest in and really educate them.
How many of your customers want to tour your facility before they say, hey, you commission you to build them a piece?
Every one of them does.
Do they? That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. It's part of the experience we're finding because it is unique. I think some people would be willing to pay just to see it print, right? As part of the process. It's kind of like if you're going to get a custom Ferrari, right? That's part of the process. You come out, you watch your Ferrari get built, you get video of it.
Yeah.
It's part of the artwork of what you're choosing there.
So how long before it's just a checkbox on a website? Send me a planter, boom, here's the design, whatever, right? Maybe you're a ways out from that. It's still pretty novel, I guess. So there's an intrigue.
I mean, there's all the technology in the world available today to do check this box and do that. But what we're finding is the fit for the product today in terms of statement pieces does require some collaborative design process between our design team and the architect. And most of them, because they've never touched 3D printed concrete, let alone designed it before, they want some hand holding, and so
Yeah.
that's part of the enjoyment of the building in the sandbox together today.
Yeah. So collaborating with you have a design team, I presume, that kind of helps with that and extracts that image or that idea
Yeah,
and helps them put it into something visual that can
yeah.
be pushed around and plugged into blueprints and pictures and such.
Yes. So the design team today, we will provide some options for the architect to work with.
Mhm.
Sometimes they'll send us, it might be the influences of the theme of the project, right? So they can
Mhm.
send a few pieces of driftwood or stones or
Okay.
colors that they're starting with. So it might be very early in the process, or it could be further down through the project before we get any kind of ideation with
Mhm.
the architect. So,
Referencing your design team makes me think a little bit about these 12 plants a couple of years from now, and obviously that team will have to grow over time. Tell me a little bit about the team and the team that will be. What are the critical skills that are going to kind of make this growth and help you get from A to B?
yeah, so every early stage business needs entrepreneurs
Hmm.
and people that dream, that they see they're okay with the gray.
Yeah,
Right?
true.
If you want to be handed a playbook and told you do A, B, C, and D, early stage is not for you. And so we have dreamers on our team
Hmm.
that see around the curve, that have some amount of strategic makeup about them, where they
Hmm.
see the vision and they're excited about it and they want to put in everything that they've got.
Hmm.
Some of the key skills, in addition to strategic planning, is just being able to collaborate.
Hmm.
We can't handle anyone who too big for the room to not
Yeah.
work with other people to say, hey, you've got something to bring. So humility is a key part.
In my experience, in a small organization or a new organization where a lot of things are being figured out and everybody has to wear a different hat and you got to change hats often, egos are just the most, the my job, your job, the ego person or whatever, those are the most disruptive,
Yeah.
distracting,
Yeah.
unhelpful. Those are the worst places for those kind of traits to exist.
Yeah, we like to fail fast, learn fast,
Mm.
and win fast. And so we have a channel on our Slack that is about, what did we fail at? What was the thing that like blew up? Or what was the thing
Yeah.
that didn't go the way we had planned? And how are we
Hmm.
going to share that with the team? Because we want us to
Yeah.
just say, hey, we're human. All of us are humans at this table. If we're not moving in the right direction, it means if we are moving in the right direction, we're going to have failures. We're going to have
Yeah.
challenges that we're going to have to say, hey, this is what happened. Man, this didn't go the way I thought. And there's both the camaraderie, right, that comes
Right.
from those failures. That's just part of
Picking each
any
other
kind
up.
of team. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've always said, Aaron, like, we want to make sure that we're transparent with each other,
Hmm.
and that we tell each other the good, bad, and the ugly of how things are going in the week, and make sure it's
Yeah.
all on the table, right? As it were, all
You
the
want to share a
cards are.
story about something you ruined recently?
There's at least a couple things that we break things on a regular basis. It's part of finding our limits.
Yeah. So just physically breaking something in your
Physically
equipment.
break it,
Yeah.
right? So we're in an industry that has obviously high standards for safety.
Hmm.
We think of construction, at the end of the day, people will interact in these spaces and set on the objects. And in some cases, these objects could be structural and hold up spaces. And so they have to meet the demands of engineering. And so
Yeah.
we work,
Okay.
our engineer, every piece, because it's unique, every piece has to be engineered. I'll give you an example of third week
Hmm.
after I had arrived. I headed out to visit with one of the largest landscape companies in the nation, who distributes some of the highest quality products, and they have a customs division. We had
Okay.
sent them 4 benches. We had our meeting with the 15 engineers, and we went out to tour the facility and see the 4 benches that we had shipped.
Hmm.
Well, only 2 of those benches survived the shipment. So we had obviously we had worked out the printing process, but then the crating
Oh
and
no.
shipping apparently had not quite as much engineering as we had hoped.
Oh no.
So you go back to, okay, who do we want to work with from a shipping perspective?
Yeah.
Do we need to get a crating engineer, and those kind of things? And so
Take
we
notes in
oh
that
yeah,
class, right?
but it wasn't something that we wanted to ignore or not look at. We actually worked with this company to how do we collaborate together. In fact, they're a great partner. They in fact wanted to send one of those folks out to our place and see how do we create these objects if they're fragile because they're efficient? I mean, one of the advantages of 3D printing is that you're talking about sustainable, green, right? They're
Yeah.
often hollow.
Mm.
So if you're printing hollow objects that aren't consuming near as much CO2 because of the reduction of material,
Yeah.
there are challenges with creating. And so we just had to be honest with what were the challenges in that process and how do we address them.
Yeah. That's a great lesson learned. Unfortunate sometimes that those failures that teach you also cost money, right? Set customer plans back a little bit, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it sure is valuable, but right, if we're honest with each other, we can solve it together and move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Every business experiences those all the time. I was just speaking. My little brother's an entrepreneur, and had a big setback, and we were just chatting about that the other day. And it's about managing your emotions in those moments so that you can still be a good student as the lesson's being taught, instead of just seeing red ink, right? Instead of just being kind of disheartened by the failure. Like, go back, look at the notes, study the questions you missed, right? And that's part of how you learn. Any other plugs you wanted to make, or things you wanted to make sure were kind of said or addressed? Talking points that you were thinking about that might be good for kind of the public to understand about the organization, either as it applies to appealing to talent that's important for you to appeal to, or appealing to customer group or stakeholder group.
One of the things I would say,
Mm-hmm.
Aaron, in working with any company, I wouldn't have arrived at Vicus 3D if it wasn't for the partnerships.
Mm.
As you look at the early stage, is high risk. And Rob Pikus is phenomenal in terms of building a business that had a DNA where we treat each other like family.
Mm.
So
Okay.
we talk about in 2023 how we're going to engage as a family, be honest with each other, look out for each other, but we're also going to have focus. So we're going to
Yes.
say no to the things that don't fit where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard as an early stage business because there's money making opportunities left and right when you have
Yeah.
a world class printer and you're talking to world class architects. There's some things that you just shouldn't do.
Just don't feel like they're right for your future as you're kind of like building out your history.
Yeah.
Right?
As I was evaluating this opportunity, one thing that was a clear piece of the recipe for success was the fact that I had two of the largest concrete installers in the nation. So companies that knew concrete construction, and they also saw how 3D printing was potentially disruptive to their marketplace
Yeah.
at some point.
Interesting.
And I thought, hey, with backers like this, and with one of the largest building supply companies in the world, Sika, who has
Okay.
very, very high, very great reputation when it comes to quality.
Mm-hmm.
I thought with these kind of partners, boy, we're going to be able to scale quick and fast. So
Yeah, that's cool.
I would say in terms of having a good recipe for success, having backers like that, that was something that was eye-catching for me coming on board.
I've got a good friend who's a building architect. I'm going to make sure he knows what Picus 3D can do. I'm curious what he'll have to say about the capabilities and how new that would be to him. Because like any craftsman or artist, when you figure out a new tool or a new toy or there's a new marker in the box, it's exciting to use it, right? Well, thank you very much for this conversation. This has been good. And I wish you and Picus 3D a ton of success over the next couple of years. And it sounds like you've got the recipe. You were vague in your reference to a couple of customers. I'm excited to see when those kind of get installed and become public points of reference. And I'm sure you'll update the imagery on your website and your social media and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing those pieces.
It's a pleasure, Aaron.
Cool. Thank you,
for your
Darren.
time.